This patch we're doing a light amount of systems retuning to some items that have either been weak for a while or we over-nerfed in previous balance passes, Crypt Bloom and Opportunity. So Crypt Bloom is something that I mentioned like a few days ago on stream. I said that like I wish Crypt Bloom was a bit better, so it would be like more comparable to Void, because Void is just a lot better right now. But I also then realized that it's like, it's probably hard to make both of them good. One of them is just always going to be better than the other. So I don't know if I'm gonna move into Crypt Bloom meta. Probably not, depending on how big the buff is. In the future, we'll also do some adjustments to the AP system to make the builds better at their specialities and adjust few outliers and generalist items, like Lianji. Example, burst builds being better at burst, HP burning builds being better at that, and haste builds better at haste. So I feel like what they're saying here is that maybe they want to give Cosmic, Horizon, or Seraph more haste and then strip away some of the stats. Maybe they want to make Torch and Lianji do more burn damage, but less like raw AP or less like haste and stuff like that. So, okay, that's going to be interesting to see how it plays out. Because like the AP itemization has been mostly figured out. The only thing that happened recently is that Roa got buffed pretty hard and now Roa is kind of entering the meta, right? This is a larger word that will take some time. Yeah, Kappa. Ahri, despite wanting to do the above to the AP system, Ahri's incentives and her Roa Lianji build is netting out to be one of her strongest builds. She has a lot of them and it's hard to maintain them all to be viable at once, but this one in particular is not in the line with her champion's identity as a mobile but easy to kill mage. 100% agree. I don't think this. I'm 100% with RIOT on this one. There should never be a world where Roa, Riftmaker, and Lianji is the best, if not one of the best builds on Ahri, right? Ahri's identity should be that she's mobile, and bursty, but also that she's easy to kill. So I'm happy that they're doing this. The problem right now is that like just HP stacking in general is just too strong, and also like Riftmaker and Roa specifically just synergize off each other a lot, right? And Lianji. So I'm not sure how exactly they're going to retune this. When it comes to Ahri, there's a couple of reasons why she uses Roa a lot better than other champions. Number one, when you go Roa on Ahri, when you buy Blasting Wand as a component, her Waveguard does not get hurt, okay? Even though you work with lower AP than if you were to rush like, let's say, Torch or Malignance, you still have enough threshold to Waveclear with Q. That's like one big thing about this build. The second of all is that the Roa has the passive where you get a skill point when you reach 10 stacks. Ahri uses that really well compared to a champion like Talia, who gains nothing from her W points. So, you know, that's a separate topic, and I've been complaining about how Riot fucked up by removing damage from Talia W, and I've went over this a billion times already. But that's like another reason why Ahri can use Roa really well. Then the third reason is that Ahri is not as haste reliant as other mages. Meaning that, you know, her E is like the most important, the reason why you want to have a lot of ability haste on Ahri is because of her E. But with this build, you max W second, and W is already pretty low cooldown by itself when you max it out, and the same goes for kind of Q. So then with this build, you're not as haste reliant because of also you swap your skill order. That's why this build can work really well on Ahri. But now, especially with Catalyst being buffed, with it being a really strong component, and then Roa also getting a little bit of a buff, helps a lot, right? But a lot of other mages, like Victor, in my opinion, for example, does not use this build as well as Ahri does. But in general, I'm happy that RIOT is changing this. Mel, we're happy with where Mel has landed and have a much better read on her power curve and how her strengths and weaknesses are manifesting. She's been a bit underpowered for a while, and so we're excited to buff her back into the meta. Observationally, people have gotten a lot better at playing around her W and her Q range post nerfs. I think she can get a bit more power. So I'm also happy to hear that. Simultaneously, I'm a little bit skeptical. I do think that Mel is weak and it's a buff, but the reason why I'm skeptical is because it's just very hard to give this champion buffs in anywhere. Like, they should probably just make it so her spear stacking is stronger, is what I would say. I think she just needs to be rewarded more with having high amounts of spears to people. I just think that Mel is always going to be very frustrating to play against, and it is not even it is not even longer the Q ability. The Q ability is now pretty slow and honestly very dodgeable. Now the frustration is going to come out from E and W, and I kind of sometimes think what if RIOT would somehow rebalance her E so it wouldn't have such a strong root, but maybe it would have lower cooldown or something, because her E is so oppressive to deal with. I don't know. I think her E is by far her best spells, but every time I see people complaining about Mel, it's always about ult, Q, or W. I really think it's about her E. Last patch, we're following up on some of the changes that didn't quite land tuning-wise, but we're quite happy with the shape of how the changes affect their kit, power, budget distribution. Singed, Gwen, Zard, Yon, and Yorick. Okay. So going over the changes very quickly, there's some on PBE that I'll go over after as well. So first, champion buff Blitzcrank, not much here to say. RIOT usually has to keep Blitzcrank a little bit under 50% win rate because he draws a lot of bans. It's not a champion that people like playing against because his hook spell is very frustrating for bot laners, right? Especially if you play like a range support. This is okay. Brand buff, so this is because of last patch. If you look at the Brand jungle, he's still hovering around 45% win rate, which is very low. I think RIOT just thinks that Brand with, because like last patch he got very minimalistic buffs. So the RIOT I think just thinks that Brand is not really going to be picked up by pro play, and he needs more buffs. Last patch just wasn't enough. Hui, so this one puts a smile on my face. Really it does. Like this one, I was like, yes, I knew it. Because I've said months before, like the moment they nerfed Hui, I said, the champion got a nerf for no reason if you compare it to all the other mid-lane meta majors that were all better than Hui, majority of champions. The champion was not even that good. It did not have any success in pro play. His solo queue win rates were not even high, or what RIOT considers Hui win rates to be high. So they just nerfed him because I genuinely think they have a hate boner for the champion. It was the most undeserved nerf in quite a while, and now they're buffing him back up. Now we're gonna see how they buff it back up, but knowing it's RIOT, they're probably gonna give him a placebo buff. Mel, happy. Renekton, I would say is also fine, although like, you know, I'm a hater of Renekton. I think like Renekton being weak is better for the game than Renekton being strong. That's like just how I see the game. Shen, that's also from last patch. I suppose that they gave him like the Q tower pushing and it didn't really give him any win rate because I checked. The win rate stayed pretty much identical. Singed, this is because last patch RIOT micro-patched changed, I think, Singed or something like that, where they gave him lower passive cooldown and lower R stats, and I guess it hurt the champion quite a lot. I think Singed lost between 1 to 2% win rate, which is pretty high for a champion, so this is why they need to give him some sort of a buff back here. So Sona, another champion that I think is strong, it's just that she's, I think, only played by mains and probably not picked a lot. And so her power is not really like perceived well. It's kind of like Ivern. So I think this champion is always very strong, but people just hate playing with it and people always think it's weak because Sona doesn't like give you a strong feeling when she's doing a lot, right? Her whole champion is just giving you auras of buffs where you don't really feel them a lot in game. So when she's carrying, you don't really recognize that she's carrying, but when you're losing because of her, it's very noticeable. And that's like the biggest problem with Sona. And then we have a Zari buff. That's also fine, I suppose. I'm trying to think like... Zari was like played a bit. I remember even in Lost Tones we played Zari a lot and now we don't. And I'm trying to think like what changed. It's like Yuntal is better, Infinity is just the same, LDR is just the same. I wouldn't even say it's about runes or items in this case. It just has to be with other champions probably pushing her out. On top of that, like they gave Jean and Kai'Sa some buffs, and then they put like Corki and Ezreal a bit away. But Zari was probably happier playing into Corki and Ezreal than into stuff like Jean and Kai'Sa, I'm assuming. I don't know. And then Zoe, we'll talk about this one a little bit later, because the buff they're giving to Zoe is already on PBA, and it's very scary. So Champs nerf Aatrox. So Aatrox to me is in the same kind of ballpark as Darius, where both champions just kind of hover around 50% win rate, and then they draw a lot of bans, both of them, and players just get instantly frustrated by them. So they nerf Darius, and Darius is really bad now. And I'm surprised they're not buffing him, but this is gonna happen sooner or later. And now I guess it's Aatrox's turn to be nerfed. Aatrox like is just very frustrating for like Diamond, Emerald, Ela for players. So champion nerfs Gwen, super happy. So I'm still not sure really where RIOT wants the direction of Gwen to go. They wanted to make her better early, so they did, but in return, they didn't really strip away any of her late game. It barely did anything, even though her late game was already really strong, right? So now we're in this like weird world where Gwen just has way better early game. Her E is like so much often more up, so she has just more spacing, more trading, more everything. And then on top of that, now her ultimate slows a lot more. So they made her ultimate extremely unskilled. They made her E be up way more often in lane. So it's like she's just way better laner. I don't know where we're going with this. I just think they should revert the ult buff where her ultimate slows for ridiculous amounts, where it is completely unskilled because one ult hits and then Gwen is just able to be on top of you with zero effort. I think this needs to be changed. Lulu is a champ that got nerfed last patch. Checked win rate, didn't move anywhere. RIOT is going for another nerf. This is pretty much what's happening here. Tristana's been secretly overpowered for a long time now. Lost Tones was, I think, kind of the first team in competitive play, from what I could see, that we started playing Tristana on both bot and ADC. The champion has extremely high win rates in high elo. She's extremely high elo skewed. She's very OP with current items. She's one of the hardest scaling ADCs in the game. Yone, so last patch, RIOT gave Yone 10% crit damage in return of stripping away CC. This actually gave Yone a buff. Even Freak talked about it, where they think Yone's win rate is going to increase about 1%, and it did. This is why they're nerfing Yone now. Yeah, that's pretty much it. They're probably going to take some damage away somewhere. And then Yorick. So, like, Yorick is like, I think it's just like it shows the incompetence of Balance Team. Genuinely, I think Yorick is just like a perfect example. They do this with so many champions. Like they change the numbers on Gwen, they make it turbo OP. Then they change the numbers on Yorick, they make him turbo OP. Now next patch they're changing the numbers on Annie. I'm wondering if she's gonna be turbo OP. I don't know how they keep doing this, but like Yorick drawing, like I think like I saw genuinely Yorick jungle had almost 60% win rate. That's like one of the highest win rates I've ever seen in League of Legends. Like they're really screwing it up. I don't know how they do it so often. Like, do they have nobody who tests these changes? Like, there's just no way they don't have a single player there that is high elo that does a jungle clear and realize that this shit is way too broken. In general, they just made Yorick way more unskilled than it was before. They made him more of a team fighter, less than a split pusher. He's just way more brain dead, and he was already pretty brain dead to play. Yorick is in the same ballpark as other champs for me, where the worse he is, the better the game is. Ahri. So, okay, Ahri, Annie, we'll talk about it. Syndra. So, Syndra, they're gonna try to push Syndra out of Blackfire Torch and Cosmic Drive build and make her more into like Luden Shadowflame type of build, because this is Syndra's identity. Syndra's identity is supposed to be a burst mage, which makes sense. I'm not really mad here that they're removing this build. I'll miss it. It was fun while it lasted. What they're probably going to do is they're probably going to decrease her cooldowns and increase her AP ratios and decrease her base damages or something like that. Like they're just gonna move the numbers around so it makes less sense to stack haste and more sense to buy raw AP or magic pen. And then Xerath. Xerath last patch got like 5% AP ratios on his abilities, and some of the abilities lost 10 damage, which meant that Xerath should be better on support, better on mid, worse on support. If you look at the winner data, win rate is exactly identical, which means the changes did fucking nothing. System buffs, Cribloom, Opportunity, Overlord's Bloodmail. So this is like a Scion buff here. Opportunity is not that good of an item on range champions. It's mostly a melee champion item. So I'm not sure if RIOT is gonna buff it for range. And then System Adjustments, Deadman's Plate. So Deadman's Plate is one of the most broken items in League. And I think what RIOT wrote is they're gonna make it have less movement speed or something like that, which is awesome. Good job, RIOT. Please nerf Deadman's Plate, especially the movement speed part. We do not need so many items when movement speed is already such... It's so unbalanced. Power creep of movement speed is just at an all-time high. We need to change that. Now, going quickly over PBE changes here. So there should be some... So okay, Zoe Q. Paddlestar's secondary target damage ratio increased from 80% to 100%. I think this is an enormous buff. This is an enormous buff. I think this is probably going to make Zoe extremely overpowered in solo queue. This buff is insane for a champion that one of her main weaknesses is just bad wave clear. Like, I wouldn't say her wave clear is terrible, but it just isn't there. And a lot of champions, like for example Ryze, can just wave clear against Zoe and then base with some biotic sauce, and you have a very easy time. Then you slowly outscale her and you slowly play control. This is an insanely ridiculous buff, and it's not just wave clear minions, by the way. It's also wave clear it's also damage to champions. So that's also not you know, forget that. I really think that they're going to have to instantly nerf Zoe. I already know that this is going to make her solo queue win rate way too high, especially in China. And yeah, that's what's gonna happen here. Aatrox change seems to be they're gonna change W from a magic damage back to physical. And then the E, they're gonna make it heal more. A little bit more if you stack HP. So I'm kind of confused here why RIOT is doing that. So the reason why RIOT changed Aatrox W to magic damage is to make lethality Aatrox builds worse. By changing it to physical, they are kind of making lethality Aatrox be better again. Second of all, and in reality, I also would say they're nerfing Bruiser Aatrox with this. And then E-healing, I mean, this is okay, I would say. It's not that big of a buff, and it's nice that Aatrox has something in his kit that incentivizes him to build HP. Because if this wouldn't be in the kit, then again, lethality Aatrox again would be better, right? And we can all agree that Bruiser Aatrox is healthier for the game than lethality Aatrox. So I'm not really sure where RIOT is going with this. I am actually just thinking that this is just going to be a nerf, because losing it from magic to physical is probably just going to be a nerf. And I don't think the item system is in a place right now where Aatrox is going to benefit from building lethality, because I remember the last time lethality Aatrox was a thing, he was mostly building Profen Hydra, right? And Profen Hydra is bad right now. Yorick. Not gonna read this, ICBA. So, okay, we have to talk about Annie. We have to talk about Annie. This is like the biggest, one of the biggest changes here. So, HP per level when it comes to Annie is going down by 6. Not that a lot. Her Q damage is going to be increased by 10 base at max rank and 5% AP ratio. I would say this overall is not that big of a damage buff on Q. It is something, it is nice, it's your first max ability. Maybe with W, so we'll talk about W now. 270 base damage, extremely high for an ability. You're getting 50 damage per rank. I think that's the same as Orianna W, if not better. So, this is insane. Like, this, I think, might make it so you want to max Ws first even on Annie. Maybe it's 3 points into W now. 3 points Q into W. Like, her W is just getting so much damage. Even the AP ratio up here by 5%. Okay. Even the cooldown is getting decreased by 1 second, which is huge on a champion like Annie, who does not itemize a lot of haste. This is a lot bigger on Annie than it would be, let's say, on Syndra, who buys a lot of haste in the build. And then, compensatively, so her R will now grant passively 10 to 12.5 to 15% magic penetration. This is a very similar passive to what Mordekaiser has on E. Why is this happening? The reason why I think RIOT is having a little bit of a magic penetration passive here is because Annie is just extremely weak against magic damage. If you buy a null magic mantle, this champion's damage gets caught in half. But the thing is, this kind of seems weird to me, because like if they do this to Annie, then they might as well consider doing this to LeBlanc, or doing this to Vax, or doing this to even Syndra potentially, because all these champions have kind of similar issue to Annie. Now it is true that Annie's kit is a lot worse in a lot of sense than like a Syndra or LeBlanc. Annie is very mobile, and she has very low ranges, right? So I kind of see the angle from where RIOT is coming from. This is also not a lot of magic pen, to be fair, but it is something. And also on top of that, this makes it so you're incentivized to put points into R, right? Because if this isn't on the kit and they mega nerf the R, then maybe you just want to max out Q and W and at level 11 not even put a point into R. Maybe that's what would happen. Now with this passive being on the kit, you probably do want to put a point into R. Okay, let me focus on picking my champ now. Attack damage on T-Burst is getting slammed by a lot. Her AP ratio is getting slammed, and the Flame Aura on T-Burst is getting also slammed by a lot of damage. So basically, her R is going to be weaker, she's losing some health, but her Q a bit stronger, her W a lot stronger, and gets a new passive. I really do think that this is probably going to be a buff to Annie. It's probably going to move her away from Malignance though, because she's less ultra-reliant and she's more reliant on other stuff. I don't know exactly how this is gonna turn out, but, you know, I'm a little bit scared. Like, Annie buffs, I don't know. Annie is the Garn of Midden, right? I don't want Annie to be good in Hyla. The game is better when Annie meta isn't a thing. Because if you go back in time, there's been times where Annie and Nico and Lissandra was in the meta in Midland, and it was just the worst meta ever. Like, Midland was just such an NPC role. It already is nowadays as well, but it could get worse, is what I'm trying to say. So please, Riot, be careful here what we're doing to Annie. And I think that's all the changes. I don't think there's anything else to talk about.